Hello and welcome. I'm going to give this a few moments to allow people to join. I'm happy to have you here, whether you're watching live or on replay. If you're watching live, I'd love for you to say hello. Let me know who's watching. It's been a little while since I've done a live on YouTube, and I've missed connecting with you here. So please do say hello. Hi, Michelle. Welcome. It's kind of late for you, but glad you're joining us. It's hard to try to find a time that works for the people that are on my channel that watch me. So I try to make it at a time that isn't too late for some people, too early for some people. Hi, Isabella. Hi, Jack. Hi, Jess. Welcome. Happy to have you all here. Please keep saying hello. Hi, Jody and Alex. Welcome. I'm happy to have you here. So Marianne and Fred, hello. So I wanted to talk about, and I wanted to do this live so that we could kind of maybe have a little bit of a conversation around this as well. So, but I wanted to talk to you a little bit about the idea of, from my perspective, what it means to be whole, what it means to return to wholeness. Obviously, I've been talking about this a lot over the past couple of months. And what does that really mean? And this is certainly one of those things that you could ask 10 different people and get 10 different answers. So I'm going to obviously be talking about it from my perspective and from my personal experience, as well as my experience in guiding other people on their journey of returning to wholeness, returning to freedom, and healing. So I think one of the things that comes to mind is that when we've experienced significant wounding in particular, so like childhood wounding, traumatic wounding, we in society has this view that we're damaged, that we're broken. And we hold on to that idea ourselves as survivors, and society, in talking about it or not talking about it, in talking about what is needed, it's often from the idea that we can never be whole, that we will always experience the damage that has been done. And we as survivors hold on to that, and we believe that maybe we can do some things that can make us feel a little bit better, to maybe do things a little bit differently. But the idea of like even being healed or certainly being whole can feel really foreign and out of reach. So if you've been hearing me talk about returning to wholeness, it's a new space that I'm creating for women who are working through emotional healing. So returning to wholeness, the idea of what it means to return to wholeness, so not specifically the space, but the idea of healing being, about returning to our wholeness, is that no matter what has created the wounding, and for most of you watching, that's probably trauma. But for many people, it doesn't have to be trauma. It can be the kinds of things that are just normal life and childhood experiences that leave a lasting impact. And there are many of those. If your parents got divorced, if you had a sibling and you experienced normal sibling rivalry, if you had a friend that you fell out with and you were no longer best friends, your first boyfriend or girlfriend broke up with you, like all of those things are normal experiences. And in themselves, they're not really necessarily traumatic. They can be, but just by and large, they're not necessarily traumatic, but they can still leave an incredibly lasting impact. And so any time that we've experienced wounding, particularly as a child, because that's when our sense of self is developed, that we carry with us throughout our lives, if we experience wounding as a child, it changes, it shifts how we view ourselves, what we believe about who we are and what is possible for our lives. It also changes what we believe at a deep level about the world around us and the people in it. We can feel that people can't be trusted or they're not safe. It's not safe for us to be out there in the world, to put ourselves out there in the world. We often end up believing that somehow we're bad, we're not enough, we're unworthy, we're undeserving, that good things aren't meant for us. And of course, a lot of other possible things that we can end up believing. But all of that takes us away from what is true within us, what is very real within us. It shifts how we experience ourselves and the things in our lives. Because particularly if it's traumatic wounding, so some sort of trauma that you've experienced, from that moment on, everything changes in terms of how you think, how you feel, how you experience your life and the people in it. Who you are doesn't change, but how you view things, how you experience things does. And again, that's true for really any type of wounding, any type of emotional wounding. If it's trauma related, then the impact is very immediate and very deep. If it's not traumatic wounding, it still happens, but it's a little bit more subtle, maybe is a way to think about that. So it takes us off. The trajectory of our soul's identity and purpose shifts. And when I say soul, I don't mean from a religious perspective, but our essence, who we are meant to be in the world. It shifts from that moment. And we go off in a different direction because we believe that that's the only direction for us. Healing, or returning to wholeness, is about finding our way back to the truth of who we are, who we've always been. The depth of our strength, our courage, our possibility, being able to come back to the sense of grounded confidence that we lost along the way on that different road. But the essence of that confidence still exists within us, no matter where that road takes us, no matter how much or how long we have lost sight of it. That exists always within us. In returning to wholeness, the idea of emotional healing, my programs, my retreat, and my one-on-one work is Journey to Freedom. And it's much the same, that the freedom that you feel on the other side of healing, well, even on the journey to that other side, that sense of freedom is a sense of ease. It's a sense of complete self-acceptance, and the freedom comes from knowing that you're okay, that you're always enough, that even when you make a mistake or you don't achieve the thing that you wanted to achieve, that you are still whole. And returning to wholeness doesn't mean that we change, doesn't mean that we have to become somebody different. It means that we find our way back, that we reconnect with that truth, with that essence that has always existed within each of us. Because no matter how damaged or broken you may feel, you are not. You are always whole. You just lose sight of that wholeness because you believe all those ideas about yourself that you've held on to. You've held on to the shame. You've held on to those little pieces of proof that you've grabbed a hold of, so-called proof that you've grabbed a hold of, that you see as the evidence that you're not enough, that you aren't worthy, that you should be ashamed. But none of that is true. None of it. None of it has ever been true. And this journey of returning to your wholeness is complex, it's complicated, it's layered, it's challenging. Because it's a process of dismantling all of that stuff that you have believed from the time that you were a young child. And every day, every month, every year has been reinforced by the things that you grab a hold of as so-called evidence of those core beliefs. Healing is about dismantling all of those ideas that you have held on to, all of those beliefs, all of that shame. It's dismantling all of that. And in that dismantling, you naturally return to what is true and real and whole within you. You've heard me say this many times. Healing isn't about changing who you are. It's about reconnecting to the truth that has always existed within you. Returning to wholeness is reconnecting with that. It's feeling the deep roots that exist, no matter the storms that have come, no matter the damage that has been done to the branches or the leaves, the blooms. Those may have been knocked away, knocked down with different types of life events and experiences. But who you are, that grounded rootedness, that grounded sense of self, has never changed. And thinking about it as this big, magnificent oak tree that has weathered so many storms, but is deeply rooted in the earth, has had the times when branches have been knocked off, where it has struggled to survive through storms or drought or floods. That rootedness, the truth of what that tree is, the existence of everything that that tree needs to survive, is in those roots. And healing is about recognizing that, trusting in that. But when we try to do that on our own, we easily lose sight of it. Because as you are going down that path, your beliefs are that you are not capable, that you're not worthy or deserving. And so as you travel down that path, you're experiencing everything from what you believe at your core. Those things I just mentioned, and maybe a couple of others, or maybe a couple of others. So everything that you experience is through that lens. So the ability to really trust in, to even see at times that there's a truth that is different than what you believe can be pretty impossible. But when we have somebody with us who can see all of that we're not able to, and they can show us, they can point it out, that helps us recognize that there are things along this journey, there are things even along that road that wounding created, right? It took us off on this different trajectory. There are things along there that we pick up on that reinforce what we believe, that we're not good enough, that we're undeserving. But when we have somebody with us, they can see the things that prove something very different. They can show us a path back to our wholeness. Because without that, we can't see that there's a different path. It's like we're going through our lives with these blinders on that only allow us to see the things that reinforce what we believe. And when we have a guide with us, they can see the whole picture to help guide us back. Not finding a brand new road, not having to create something brand new, just helping us find our way back. But we need to keep being reminded there is this other road. Otherwise, we just keep coming back to this road that we've known, that we've created. And this is the idea of neuroscience, neuroplasticity. Because this road that took us off in this other direction is those neural pathways. And every piece of so-called evidence reinforces, makes those grooves a little bit deeper. When we can recognize that there's another path, and we have somebody, we have the ongoing practice of coming back to this original road, that is creating those new neural pathways that you've heard. That is the practice. That's the practice of healing. That's the practice of remembering your wholeness, remembering your truth. That is what healing is, and that is why it's not as simple as learning. No matter all the amazing stuff you've learned, we need so much more than just learning on a cognitive level. We need the practice. We need the ongoing reminders. And that is why I talk so much about needing support of somebody that really understands all of those nuances. It's also one of the reasons why I talk about the importance of community and group support in healing, no matter what it is that we're healing from, but particularly childhood wounding. We need that. When I think about my own experience, my own healing experience, the individual work I did in the very beginning was helpful. But starting that group when I did in the beginning of my healing, just I think a few weeks in, And I think about leaving on that first night, recognizing that sense of freedom in that moment that came from knowing that I wasn't alone, that I wasn't crazy, that it wasn't just me. And walking out of there that night, saying to myself out loud, this was a long time ago, but I remember it. I remember the feeling walking out of there and saying, why isn't anybody talking about this? And I said it with that confusion and disillusionment in a way. Why isn't anybody talking about this? If we would just talk about it, we wouldn't have to feel this way. And in that moment, the we I was referring to was the people in that group that night. But I sensed that it wasn't just us. At this time, people were not talking about it publicly. But knowing, sensing that the difference it would make for so many people if we would just talk about it. And the it wasn't even specific to sexual abuse. That was a part of it, but it was how we were affected, what we believed, the kinds of thoughts that we had, and how we were showing up in our lives in ways that reinforced those beliefs, in ways that were not helpful to how we wanted to feel and who we wanted to be. And of course, I didn't know it then, but that is what I have continued to come back to, even without it consciously connecting. That we need to talk about the stuff that we're told we shouldn't talk about. That we need community of people who are willing to talk about it, who are willing to share vulnerably, who are willing to say, me too. Because we cannot heal on our own. None of us can. And whether that is with a therapist, within a group led by peers, and you're still getting professional support, or led by a professional, we need community. It's part of the reason that I say that healing happens in connection. And that can be one-on-one connection, but the community connection is also such an important part. There's healing that happens in community that we just cannot experience individually. And there is healing that happens individually that we also cannot experience in community. I think they're both an important part of the healing process. And over probably about, 4 years, maybe, I don't remember how long, I've wanted to create a space for people to come together in community for healing. And I've done that. I've been doing that in different ways, but I know that it's been inaccessible for so many people, primarily because of the investment. And I love those spaces, those really kind of intimate small groups. I love those. But I've wanted to create something that is more accessible and has the opportunity to invite more people into it. And that is returning to wholeness. It's a sisterhood. Right now, it is just for women. I would love to be able to create something for men. Unfortunately, there just aren't a lot of men that I'm aware of yet um, who are ready, who are willing, who desire to do this. So right now, returning to wholeness is for women and those who identify as women, who want a space, who desire a space, maybe even have craved a space to come together with other women for healing. Returning to wholeness is an ongoing community of women coming together every month to learn, to grow, to practice, and to heal. I will be leading practices and learning on different topics each month related to healing overall. There will be time for live Q&A. It will be the only place where I'm doing live Q&A for the foreseeable future. There will be a PDF, downloadable PDF that you'll have that will have practices and journal prompts for healing. And as the community grows over time, there will be more that I will be implementing inside of the space, inside of the sisterhood. And those who join me for this first cohort will be helping me create what is going to be present in the space as we go forward and invite more people in after a few months or so. So please feel free to share any questions or thoughts that you have about that if you're interested. But regardless of whether you join me or not for returning to wholeness, I want you to recognize that healing emotional wounding, particularly childhood wounding, is not something that we can just make a choice about. It's not something that we just learn like you're going to graduate school and you just change. You just are able to implement it and everything is different. I wish that it were as simple as that. It's not, because it's not about what happens cognitively. That's a part of it. But it's what happens on all levels. It's about taking what we know cognitively into every cell in our being. It's about integrating and internalizing. And in order for that to happen, we need to practice. So give yourself grace when you feel like you've taken steps back, because there are no steps back. Be kind to yourself on the days that you find that you're struggling, when a couple days ago you felt like you were in a whole new place on this journey. Because when you meet yourself with kindness and grace and self-compassion, you're helping yourself recognize that it's safe to continue to move forward. That this so-called setback isn't a setback. It's part of the process. Be kind to yourself. Be compassionate with yourself. And show yourself the same grace that you show others as they're navigating the messiness of life. I'd love to hear your thoughts, share your comments, even if you're watching this on replay. And if you have any questions about returning to wholeness, I'm also happy to answer. So The other thing that I want to say about returning to wholeness is that I have created it very intentionally with the idea of making it more accessible and in terms of other things that I've offered. I've also created it with the intention of growing the community over time and implementing more as that happens. So there is a link in the description with all the information about it, and I will actually share it here in the chat as well. So if you want to take a look, you can. So I'm just going to go through and see who's here. Hello, everybody. I had a fantasy recently that inside of me there is a shiny mushroom that is the real me, true and therefore unhurt, and outside there is a dark shell. But if I make good choices, the mushroom grows. Oh, I love that. And I think that's such an interesting way to think about it, because the truth of who you are, who you were born as, the light that you were born with, that has always been inside of you. Always. It's never faltered. Never. And so no matter where this other road has taken you, no matter how much you've struggled, no matter what mistakes you've made, no matter how many regrets you have, how many missed opportunities, none of that has ever changed what is possible for you, nor who you are. Please remember that. It's hard to believe otherwise when people are around you who are supposed to love you are the ones telling you it's your fault, that you deserved it, that you asked for it. Tammy, I am so sorry that the people around you continue to hurt you, because that is hurtful. It's not true. The reality is, for people that have experienced childhood trauma, generally speaking, of course, this is not true across the board, but in all reality, for those of us who experience childhood trauma, the person inflicting that trauma is often somebody that we know, right? 85%. Some statistics say higher, some maybe 80%, but generally about 85% of childhood trauma survivors are traumatized by people that we know and trust, which means that our family system likely also has some sort of relationship with them, also likely knows and trusts them. Well, for the same reasons that we use denial, avoidance, and rationalization, they are as well. So when you're healing, you're working through that, right? You're naming it. But the people around you are not healing. The people around you are still in denial or avoidance or rationalizing. And in order for them to continue to do that, they have to make it seem that you are wrong, that what you are saying could not possibly be true, or at least not wholly true. But that is about them. It is not about you. And I know that that can feel impossible to accept when the people that you desire support from the most are not able to give it to you, but that never has anything to do with you or what is true and real. But you're right, it is hard. And one of the things that I've recognized, mostly in doing this work over a long period of time, is that This is where setting boundaries is really important, and having community, having people that can tell the truth, who can speak it, who can see it, who can remind you continually of what is true. We need that when everybody around us is telling us something different. We need people who can show us what is real and true, which is what part of the reason why community can be such an important part of healing, so that we have that reminder time and time again. Yeah, Jody, thank you for sharing this. In response to Tamia, recognizing that I felt the same thing from my own mother as a child, even though she never directly said those words. That is so important, because so much of what we end up believing isn't necessarily because somebody has said something very specific. It's an experience that we have. It's an interpretation of something. It's reading between the lines. And that is very real to us. But it doesn't take somebody directly saying something that is hurtful in order for us to believe something. Is it still possible to return to wholeness if there was never a time prior to the trauma? How do you recognize who you have always been if you've never experienced her? Great question. So, is it still possible to return to wholeness if there was never a time prior to the trauma? Yes, because even when, and I've known people that this is the case, even if your conception, so when you were conceived, even if that was a result of trauma for somebody else, so literally never a moment that did not involve some sort of trauma. But for a lot of people, it's maybe birthing trauma or being abused, traumatized after birth, after your birth, whether it was immediately as a newborn or in the first year of life or the first few years of life. Is it possible to return to wholeness? Absolutely, because wholeness is about who you are. And no matter what, even if you are conceived through trauma, so from your first moment of life in conception, who you are, your potential, your light, your love, the essence of who you are is that. It doesn't matter how you were conceived. It doesn't matter what kind of pregnancy your biological mother experienced. It doesn't matter what happened to you upon your birth or after. That has always been who you are and what is possible for your life. Always. How do you recognize who you have always been if you've never experienced her? It's more about how you end up feeling. And that is the freedom. That is the deeply rooted sense that I talk about. So you don't have to see her. You don't have to describe her. You feel her. And you know it when you feel it. And what I can tell you is that there isn't even necessarily going to be a very specific moment that is like this huge, beautiful angel singing kind of thing. Maybe it is. But because it's a process and a practice, you have moments when you connect with it. when you connect with her, when you feel it. But then the doubt will creep in again. And so you're not so sure. But the more moments of connection that you have with her, the more you begin to trust her. So you recognize her when you feel her, when you stand in that truth and you feel that sense of freedom that comes. And you feel the freedom in that trust, you feel that groundedness in that trust. And that trust doesn't mean that everything is going to be perfect from here on out. Not at all. It's the trust in knowing that whatever comes, you are going to get through it. You're going to be okay, and you are worthy of getting through it and having the life that you desire. That's what it is. What's a PDF? Good question. So I know you've experienced with this maybe you've experienced this with me before. So a PDF is something that you will have access to. It's basically an electronic little mini book that you'll be able to download and fill out if you want, or you can download and print. So you can actually write in it. So it's something you can print, or it's something you can just read on your computer or device. But it will have, so like in Journey to Wholeness, for example, which is a course that I have for healing childhood trauma. Actually, no, not in there. In the gratitude challenge that I did. I'm trying to think. I know I've created a few of these. In the gratitude challenge that I've led a few times, that's a downloadable PDF. So it has all the journal prompts for the challenge, and you can download that. That's a PDF. Or if you've bought my meditation album, Connecting Within, there's a downloadable PDF that goes along with that as well. So basically, it will be like a tiny little mini book that you can just access on your device, or you can print out and actually write in. Hi, Brenda. Thank you. I'm so glad it feels that way. Listening with a cup of coffee. Thanks for making such a lovely space of perspective. I loved your last video on repeating the same things over and over. It was spot on for me, and I always questioned it. Also, how can I logically know something to be true yet not apply it to myself? You're not alone here. And this is what can feel so incredibly frustrating to people. So this is the practice. This is the process and the practice of healing, and why healing takes the time that it does. Because we have to, what we know at a cognitive level, and we're kind of detached. Our breath, our body, our cells, our heart is detached from what we know cognitively. And in part that can happen from trauma. But I would say that most of us generally are somewhat detached from what's happening internally. So over time, with continued reminders, with somebody helping you understand or see, connect really, that the moments when you feel different, when you did something different, when you can connect to what that feels like in those moments within your body. And we have a lot of difficulty, and sometimes it can be impossible to do that purely on our own, because our cognition, our thoughts are up here, they're not here. And we repeat the same thoughts over and over again. We repeat the thoughts that we believe and that we know. So internalizing it doesn't just happen. We need the continual practices and reminders of what is happening along the road, along the journey. So I'll give you an example. In my work one-on-one with people, much of what I do over sessions is pointing out when things are different. So people will sometimes share with me that maybe so I'm going to give you a very kind of specific example of something relatively recent. So somebody was talking about trying. Well, I'm trying to do this. I'm trying to make better choices. And we had just talked about something that was a better choice. And when she shared it, she was sharing it from a place of, actually, this may not be entirely true, but this is an example. So I'm going to weave a little something different in here. But what often happens, somebody will share something that was different, but they don't see it as different or not different enough. Well, it wasn't perfect, or I should have been able to do it sooner, or I should have been able to do it better, or I should have felt better about it. So it doesn't really register that it was different. And so when we're talking about it, well, I'm trying to make better choices, but it's just not working. Well, that's not true. So part of what I do often is, wait a second, you just told me that you did this and that is different, right? That you did do that. It's not that you're trying and failing, you did it. And in that moment, people are able to go back and hold on to, they're able to internalize that truth. Because otherwise, that just floats right on by, and what you're left with is, I'm trying, but I'm not doing it well enough. I'm not good enough. I'm failing. That's what you're left with. So that reinforces the belief of not being good enough, of not being able to do it, of not being deserving of it because you keep failing. So in the healing process, and again, why we need somebody on this journey with us, is that there are moments that are happening along the way that when we're with ourselves, we completely miss. And that is a large part, a pretty significant part of how we take what we know logically, cognitively, and experience it within our being. And all of that is necessary, absolutely necessary for healing. And so, like, when you hear people talk about somatic healing, or even somewhat to a degree, energy healing, it's all of that. Because feeling that, recognizing what that feels like in that moment, that is connecting somatically. That is taking that in. It's feeling the energy of that. It's being able to recall that later, to reconnect to that feeling in your body. Reconnecting with Mondays or Gratitude Monday. And so often I talk about letting yourself experience the felt sense of gratitude, of appreciation, of pride, so that you know what that feels like in your body. And that is a practice. We have to experience it over and over again. I can't wait to get to know her. I think little by little, see a glimpse of her, but then I feel unsure. It makes total sense. Oh my gosh, that makes me feel a little emotional. The idea of can't wait to get to know her. Yes, I can't wait for all of you to know her, to trust her, to love her, to no longer push her away or feel ashamed, to be able to imagine scooping her up in your arms and holding her and feeling proud of her. That is returning to wholeness. Whew. Sometimes when I do drink at social events, I can feel more comfortable and actually like a whole person as it turns down my anxieties. Is this still healthy? Jack, this is a great question. You know, the thing about substances, generally speaking, is that they lower our defenses. And defenses are kind of another way to think of coping mechanisms, because our coping mechanisms that we developed early on are a defense against feeling something that isn't good for us to feel, or dealing with something that is really incredibly difficult to deal with. And when those defenses are down, we can feel more, which a lot of people feel like is a bad thing. And it can be ultimately, depending on how much we're doing it or using it as a crutch. But it allows some of that fear, some of that uncertainty, even some of that vulnerability sometimes to subside a little bit. And so sometimes people will become, like they'll talk about things that they wouldn't otherwise talk about. They'll do things that they wouldn't necessarily otherwise do. And that could be bad as well. But in terms of, is this still healthy? I think that in terms of, is it a healthy way to connect with the truth of who you are? Probably not so much. Because if you're doing it from a place that is not, that you're not able to really connect with kind of authentically when you're not under the influence of something, then it's not really you in your current state that's able to connect with that. So I think it's important to be able to practice that when you're not under the influence of something. But if it's an occasional drink, and you're practicing doing things that are good for you and it's not creating difficulty for you in some way, then I don't think that there's necessarily anything wrong with it. But in terms of the process or the practice of healing, I think it can be important to do that from a place where we are really clear-headed and choosing, very consciously choosing to do that. Michelle shared her experience with alcohol. And this is, so not at all suggesting that there's an addiction here, but it's one of the reasons why addiction is so problematic and treatment of addiction is so problematic, because so much of addiction treatment is about the substance or the behavior, like eating disorders or something. It's about the thing. It's not about getting at, why did you start doing that thing in the first place? And you started doing that thing because you were trying to not feel something. So you have to recognize, what am I trying not to feel? What is it that I'm trying to avoid or deny? Otherwise, it keeps repeating itself, right? Working with my therapist on this. I was a child, it wasn't my fault. Still haven't been able to talk too much about my childhood as I tend to drift off mid-sentence. That's pretty normal. And it takes a long time to fully accept that and be able to trust in it. It takes a long time. It took me a long time. See, look at the connection that's happening right here. So the example, Jody shared the example specifically of, I logically know that it's not my fault, yet can't apply it or believe it to be true for me. And so I think some of what I was saying before also applies here, but specifically with this example, I know it wasn't my fault. Generally, so how I would work with somebody is, and how I work generally, even like in group or community experiences, hint, hint, is helping people recognize what are the things that you go back to over and over again that you hold on to that make you believe that it is your fault. And we work through that. And as you work through that, you begin to get to a place where you can really fully trust in that. So each of us has things that we go to, and certainly there's a lot of commonalities. Like if you look at a group of 10 people who've experienced childhood trauma, there's a good chance that maybe all 10 of them go back to the same thing. But there might be something very specific that a few go to that is very different. So recognizing what is that thing that you keep coming back to that makes it your fault? Because there's something, if not many things, that you go back to depending on the circumstance, and you have to work to undo that. So, and the more you come back to that and work through that, kind of the energetic aspect of that, you begin to be able to believe it. Because I was definitely there. I could see that for everybody else. I believed it for everybody else wholeheartedly. Never did I question that maybe somebody else did cause it to happen for them. But for me, even for a long time into my healing, I could always go back to finding something why it was not true for me. And we tend to go back to maybe a few things over and over again. I think I'm a little scared too. Been blocking it out for years, trying to act like it never happened, never said it out loud before. Saying it aloud seems terrifying to me. You're not alone here. This is such a common thing. And this being able to say it out loud is part of the healing, but it's part of the reason that it's part of the healing isn't just for the sake of saying it out loud. It's also partly for the sake of honoring that it's true. Because when you say it out loud, it's almost as if you cannot be in denial any longer. And that little girl within you, that little boy within you, we have been telling her or him throughout our lives that it's not real. Like, I don't remember who said it earlier, sorry. Your mom, your family members are telling you that you're making it up. Well, that's really what we're doing to our child self when we deny it, when we minimize it, when we say to ourselves, it actually is my fault. We are saying to that little child, it's your fault. That didn't really happen. It wasn't really that bad. We do that to ourselves. How many times over the years have you done that to yourself? It's no wonder that we struggle in the way that we do. You're welcome, Jack. Patience, patience, patience. Such an important part of this process. That's great, Michelle. So the Thank you, everybody. I think that I've gotten through all the comments. I really appreciate you being here with me, sharing this time, sharing yourself, sharing your stories and your experiences. Truly, the more that we can share, the more that we can talk about our own fears and our experiences, the more we help other people recognize that they're not alone, that it's not just them, that we're not crazy because we think and feel the same things that everybody else does. It makes such an important difference for all of us. And if you would like to have a space where you can come to just be yourself, to give, to receive support, to know that you're not alone, to practice the healing, to take what you know, what you've learned, and learn how to practice integrating it, internalizing it into every cell in your being, to meet her, to feel grounded and trusting in that truth. I want to invite you to joining me and other women in returning to wholeness. You can find all the details in the link that I've pinned to the top of this live video and in the description below if you're watching this on replay. All the information is there. Registration opens on this Friday, July 30th. I think I'm going to be doing a live right before I open it to the public. So if you are not on my email list, then you can sign up with this link that I'm sharing here, because I'm opening it with tiered pricing. So the first 10 people who join will be at $17 per month. The next 10 people will be at $22 per month. The following 10 people will be at $27 per month. And anybody after that will be $37 per month. I'm pretty sure it's going to be 37. The other ones are definite. The 37, I'm not positive of yet. And the people on my email list will have first access to joining. So if you're interested, you can look at all the details over there at that link. And if you've got any questions, feel free to let me know. You can send an email, healing@courageousjourneys.com. You can also leave your questions in the comments and I will come back and answer your questions. So I will be doing at least one more live for you. So stay tuned for that. I'm actually considering doing a Zoom video and inviting people to Zoom on Friday instead of doing it live on YouTube. If you're watching this live, let me know if you would like to join me. If you would like to join me on Zoom on Friday, this Friday. If you're watching this on replay before Friday the 30th, you can let me know if you'd like to if you would like to join me. I don't know why I keep saying that, on Zoom instead of YouTube. I'm not sure which one is the better option. So if you've got a preference, you can let me know. So stay tuned, and I will also be announcing that in my emails. So make sure that you are signed up for my email list if you are interested. So I will look forward to connecting with you later this week. And I would love to be able to connect with you inside of returning to wholeness. Thank you all for being here and sharing so that other people know that they're not alone. I'll look forward to seeing you soon. Bye-bye.